Okay, imagine this. The late 1800s, American frontier, wind blowing, maybe some distant hoofbeats, saloon door creaks, then a gun clicks. Now think about this. Over 3,000 arrests. One of the very first Black Deputy U.S. Marshals west of the Mississippi.
A crucial figure.
Exactly, but a name that, well, most of us probably didn't learn in history class. And could his story, maybe, just maybe, connect to a certain masked writer?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the show that takes those stories you think you know or maybe don't know at all, and we dig deeper.
Unearthing the layers beneath.
Today, it's all about the extraordinary life of Bass Reeves. We're going from the horrors of enslavement right up to him becoming this truly formidable federal lawman.
It's quite a journey. We'll look at his career, that incredible arrest record, why he was sort of forgotten for so long.
And that Lone Ranger question, of course, we have to touch on that. So where do we even start with someone like Bass Reeves? His life is just so immense.
Well, I think what jumps out right away is the sheer length of his service as a marshal. We're talking 1875 all the way to 1907 when Oklahoma became a state.
Wow, over 30 years. That's not just a short stint.
Not at all. He was a constant presence, a force, really, during this incredibly turbulent time in American history, especially in that part of the country.
And think about the context. A man born into slavery, rising to become a federal officer.
With authority over everyone, white citizens included in federal matters, this is happening while Jim Crow laws are taking root elsewhere. It really challenges our standard picture of the Old West.
It absolutely does. So to really grasp that, we need to go back to his birth, his enslavement.
Right. Born in Arkansas, probably around July 1838. Property of William Steele Reeves, and later his son, George Reeves, over in Texas.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? Starting life owned by someone and then ending up enforcing the law, deciding the fate of others.
You have to assume that early experience, the sheer injustice of slavery, must have profoundly shaped him, gave him a deep understanding of freedom or the lack of it.
And then came the Civil War. He was forced to go with George Reeves, who was a Confederate colonel.
Right, so he's witnessing this huge conflict, this fight over the very system enslaving him, but from the Confederate side, unwillingly. That's complex.
And it's during the war that things take a dramatic turn. The story, or legend perhaps, involves a card game.
Yeah, the most common account is an altercation, reportedly over cards, with George Reeves. Bass supposedly got the better of him physically.
And then he just bolted, made a run for it.
He escaped, fled into what was then Indian Territory, basically present-day Oklahoma. I mean, think about the courage that took. Leaving the only life he knew, dangerous as it was, for the unknown dangers of the territory.
It really makes you wonder what that final straw was. Was it the fight?
Just a moment of opportunity. Or maybe just years of oppression boiling over. Fleeing there, though, it wasn't just escaping from something, it was escaping to a potential, albeit uncertain, freedom.
And he didn't just hide out there. He really integrated. Lived among the Seminole, the Creek, the Cherokee tribes for several years.
Yeah, and crucially, he learned their languages. At least 5 of them, apparently. Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole, Creek.
That's incredible. Not just picking up a few phrases, but mastering them.
And learning their skills, too, you know? Tracking, survival, how to navigate that specific land. This wasn't just about staying alive. It was about acquiring deep knowledge.
Skills that would prove absolutely vital later on.
Exactly. That linguistic ability, that cultural understanding, it gave him an edge few others had, whether they were lawmen or outlaws. He could move through that territory, understand its people, in a way others simply couldn't.
So the Civil War ends, the 13th Amendment passes, and Bass Reeves is officially a free man.
Right. He settles down near Van Buren, Arkansas, becomes a farmer, a rancher, marries Nellie Jenny. They have a big family, 10 or 11 kids.
You'd think after everything he'd been through, slavery, the war, escaping, he'd just want peace and quiet.
You would think. But the place and the time, especially that adjacent Indian territory, it was, well, wild is an understatement. Lawlessness was rampant.
So explain the situation there. Indian Territory wasn't a state yet.
No, not until 1907. Before that, it was this unique area, federal land, but home to numerous Native American nations and also a refuge for outlaws fleeing state jurisdictions. It fell under the federal court in Fort Smith, Arkansas.
The famous Fort Smith Court.
Yes, the U.S. Federal Court for the Western District of Arkansas. And policing this huge, dangerous territory was a massive challenge.
Which brings us to Judge Isaac C. Parker, the hanging judge.
Right. He took over in 1875, determined to impose some order. He got authorization to hire 200 Deputy U.S. Marshals, a huge number.
And this is where Reeves gets pulled back into a more public and dangerous life.
Precisely. The U.S. Marshal at the time, James F. Fagan, was tasked with finding capable deputies, and he needed people who knew the territory, knew the languages, knew the people.
And Bass Reeves fit the bill perfectly. His reputation, even just as a citizen who knew the area, must have preceded him.
It seems so. Fagan recruited him. And this is huge. Reeves becomes one of the very first Black Deputy U.S. Marshals commissioned west of the Mississippi River.
Just pause on that for a second. A former slave, given a badge, a gun, and federal authority.
In 1875. As Reconstruction is ending and the racial backlash is intensifying in many parts of the South, it's remarkable. He had the authority to arrest anyone, regardless of race, on federal warrants.
It speaks to his skills, sure, but also maybe the sheer desperation for competent people who could actually do the job in that territory.
I think that's a big part of it. Practicality sometimes overrode prejudice, at least in this specific context. They needed results.
Yeah, here's another detail that just blows my mind. He was illiterate.
Right. He couldn't read or write.
So how did he handle warrants, arresting the right people?
He'd have someone read the warrants to him, and then he'd memorize them, every detail, names, charges, descriptions.
And the record shows he never arrested the wrong person. Out of thousands of arrests.
It's astonishing. It points to an incredible memory, obviously, but also probably amazing listening skills, attention to detail, maybe a real gift for reading people.
He had to rely on other senses, other skills, maybe more intensely than literate deputies.
Exactly. It's a fascinating example of turning a potential disadvantage into, well, not an advantage maybe, but certainly not a barrier to being incredibly effective.
So he served for 32 years. 32 years as a Deputy U.S. Marshal.
From 1875 right up to 1907.
And the numbers are just staggering. Over 3,000 arrests credited to him.
3,000. It's hard to even comprehend that number in the context of the time, the travel, the danger.
And he was involved in numerous shootouts, killed at least 14 men in self-defense. Some sources say maybe even up to 20.
Which was unfortunately part of the job sometimes. Resisting arrest often meant violence back then.
But here's the kicker. He was reportedly never wounded himself, not once in 32 years.
That's the part that seems almost mythical. It suggests incredible skill, tactical awareness, maybe some luck too, but mostly just exceptional competence under fire. He must have been incredibly careful and incredibly good.
He wasn't just about gunfights, though. He was known for his disguises.
Yes. He was apparently a master of disguise, using them to get close to outlaws who were expecting a marshal to ride in, looking like a marshal.
There's that famous story about him posing as a tramp, right?
Yeah.
To catch these two brothers.
Uh-huh. He supposedly shot holes in an old hat, dressed in rags, walked nearly 30 miles to their mother's cabin.
Walked. He didn't ride.
Walked, pretending to be on the run himself, gained the mother's sympathy, she let him stay, and when the sons showed up, he had the drop on them. Arrested both.
That's dedication and cleverness, walking 28 miles in disguise.
It shows his resourcefulness. He wasn't just relying on his reputation or his gun. He used his wits, his understanding of psychology.
And he went after some really tough characters, big names in the outlaw world.
Oh, absolutely. He tracked down and killed Bob Dozier, who was considered a pretty notorious criminal.
Wasn't there a gang he broke up? The Story Gang.
Yes, the Tom Story Gang, known for horse theft. Reeves confronted them and ended up killing Tom Story in the ensuing fight.
Even Bill Starr, the famous bandit queen, supposedly surrendered when she heard Reeves had her warrant.
That's the legend, anyway. Whether it's literally true or not, it speaks to the power of his reputation. Just knowing Bass Reeves was after you was enough to make even hardened outlaws reconsider.
But maybe the most telling story, the one that really shows his commitment to the law above all else, involves his own son.
Ah, yes. Benny Reeves, a truly difficult, heartbreaking situation.
What happened there?
In 1902, his son Benny was charged with murdering his wife. A warrant was issued.
And Bass Reeves?
Bass insisted on taking the warrant himself. He tracked down his own son, arrested him, and brought him in to face justice.
I can't even imagine the personal agony of that, arresting your own child for murder.
It's almost unthinkable. Benny was later convicted, served time, though he was eventually pardoned and released. But for Bass to do that? It shows an unbelievable dedication to his duty, to the principle that the law applied to everyone, no exceptions.
Even himself, right. Wasn't he put on trial once?
He was. In 1887, he was charged with murder himself.
What were the circumstances?
He accidentally shot and killed his posse cook, William Leach. Reeves maintained it was a complete accident. Maybe his gun misfired while cleaning it or something like that.
In the outcome.
He stood trial, defended by colleagues, actually, and was acquitted. But the fact that he was charged and tried shows that even this legendary lawman wasn't above the system he served.
It adds another layer. He enforced the law, sometimes brutally, but he was also subject to it.
Absolutely. It reinforces that sense of integrity even when facing his own potential ruin.
So his long federal career ends in 1907. Why then?
Oklahoma achieves statehood. The old Indian territory system and the federal court's jurisdiction changed dramatically. Local law enforcement took over many duties.
And the timing also coincided with, well, a changing racial climate, legally.
Right. Statehood brought with it new laws, including Jim Crow segregation laws being implemented across the South and border states. A black man holding the kind of authority Reeves had held as a federal marshal likely wouldn't have been acceptable under the new state government structure.
It's a sad irony. His service ends just as the legal framework shifts to explicitly disenfranchise black citizens.
It is. But he didn't just retire. He took a job as a city police officer in Muskogee, Oklahoma.
Still wearing a badge.
Still wearing a badge. Served for about 2 years, from 1907 to 1909. And supposedly, during his time on that beat, there were 0 reported crimes.
0. Just his presence was enough.
Apparently so. His reputation was still that powerful, even on a local level. People knew who he was and what he represented.
He finally retired for good after that and passed away not long after, in 1910. Bright's disease, I believe?
Yes, kidney disease. Died at the age of 71.
So after this incredible life, this monumental career, why was he forgotten? Why isn't Bass Reeves a household name like, say, Wyatt Earp or Wild Bill Hickok?
That's the million-dollar question, really. And it's probably a combination of factors.
Race has to be a major part of it, doesn't it?
Almost certainly. The history of the West, like much of American history, was largely written by and about white men. The idea of a black man wielding federal authority, arresting white outlaws, challenging the racial hierarchy, that didn't fit the preferred narrative, especially as Jim Crow became more entrenched.
So his story was inconvenient or actively suppressed.
Possibly both. Historical records weren't always kept meticulously, and stories passed down often centered figures who fit the dominant cultural mold. There might have been discomfort or even outright refusal to celebrate a black man in such a powerful role. His story just got pushed aside, lost.
Until more recently, there's been a resurgence of interest.
Yes, thankfully. Largely thanks to historians like Art Key Burton, who literally wrote the book on him, Black Gun, Silver Star. His work really brought Reeves back into the light.
Which brings us back to that other question. The Lone Ranger.
Ah, yes. The masked man.
The similarities are kind of striking when you lay them out. A lawman known for his unwavering moral code.
Check.
Often worked with a Native American companion or tracker.
Reeves often worked with Native American postmen, absolutely. He spoke their languages, knew the culture.
Master of disguise.
We talked about that. Definitely Reeves.
Excellent marksman. Reportedly gave out silver dollars or something memorable.
Reeves was known for his skill with firearms. The silver bullet or silver dollar thing is more associated with the Lone Ranger myth, but Reeves did leave calling cards sometimes, apparently.
So, is it plausible? Could Bass Reeves be the inspiration?
It's tempting. The parallels are there. And the timing sort of works. Reeves was active during the period when those kinds of Western legends were forming.
But there's no smoking gun. No diary entry saying, base this character on Bass Reeves.
Exactly. There's no direct documented proof connecting the creators of the Lone Ranger, who debuted on radio in the 1930s, specifically to Bass Reeves. It's become a popular theory, almost a piece of folklore itself.
And some argue focusing too much on the Lone Ranger link does Reeves a disservice.
Yeah, there's that perspective, too. That Bass Reeves' real life, his own story, is so incredible and important, it doesn't need to be validated by a possible connection to a fictional character. His legacy stands entirely on its own merits.
That's a fair point. Whether he inspired the Lone Ranger or not, his actual life story is just phenomenal.
It really is. From slavery to legendary lawman, upholding justice in one of the most dangerous places and times in America, all while navigating immense racial barriers. It's a testament to his skill, his resilience, his character.
His story definitely forces us to rethink who the heroes of the West were, to see a much more diverse and complex picture than the old black and white movies showed us.
Absolutely. And the fact that we are talking about him now, that his story is being rediscovered and told through books, TV shows, statues, it's important. It helps give us a fuller, more accurate understanding of our own history.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on Bass Reeves, it leaves me wondering, who else is out there? What other figures, what other crucial stories have been overlooked or buried by time and bias?
It's a vital question. What does rediscovering someone like Reeves tell us about how history is written and how much more there might be to uncover? It challenges us to keep digging, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes you think about the narratives we accept and the voices we might be missing.
It encourages that critical look, definitely. Questioning the stories we've been told, seeking out those marginalized perspectives. Bass Reeves reminds us the real American story is often way more interesting and complicated than the simplified versions.
We definitely encourage you, our listeners, to keep exploring. Share your thoughts on Bass Reeves or maybe other historical figures you think deserve more attention.
And if you found this discussion valuable, maybe leave us a rating or review. It genuinely helps other people find the show and discover these stories.
Yeah, please do. And if you want to learn more about Bass Reeves specifically,
Definitely check out Art T. Burton's biography, Black Gun, Silver Star. There's also a historical fiction trilogy by Sidney Thompson that's quite good. And of course, the recent TV series, Lawman, Bass Reeves.
great recommendations.
They all offer different ways into his story.
Okay, so next time on the deep dive, we're shifting gears from the Wild West to the world of music.
Ooh, interesting. Who are we diving into?
Someone who absolutely shredded on the guitar and laid the groundwork for rock and roll, but maybe doesn't always get the credit she deserves. Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Ah, the godmother of rock and roll. Fantastic choice. That's going to be a great conversation.
It definitely will be. So join us then for another deep dive.